Donald Trump returns to Washington with both houses of Congress in his party's control.
Isn't it nice to win? It's nice to win.
As the president-elect met with both his successor and predecessor, we take a look at how the Trump administration is taking shape. Welcome to PBS News Weekly. I'm William Brangham. President-elect Trump took a victory lap in the nation's capital this week, meeting with House Republicans on the Hill and with President Biden in the Oval Office. As Lisa Desjardins reported, it came as Trump's new cabinet began to take shape and Republicans secured control of both the House and the Senate.
The 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
Donald Trump's big return to Washington echoed his rallies on the campaign trail.
God bless the USA.
Walk-up song and all.
It's nice to win.
The president-elect spoke to House Republican leadership for the first time since his victory last week.
We worked with a lot of you to get you in, and you helped me, and you helped me too.
Much of the meeting happened behind closed doors.
It was mostly kind of a replay of Donald Trump's greatest hits. You know, I think it was more just a reminder to the troops to hang together, get things done. He intends to move pretty fast and, strap it up and get ready.
In the room was Elon Musk, reportedly greeted with a standing ovation one day after Trump named him, along with Vivek Ramaswamy, to lead a brand new Department of Government Efficiency. Despite its name, it is not a government entity or agency. Those in attendance welcomed Musk to the party.
The members acknowledge his presence and want him to be part of an administration moving forward that helps make our government more efficient.
We need these people that can bring in a new perspective, if you will, to how we run the agencies. And I think we can get more done with less money. And so eliminating the deficit is obviously something that all Americans are concerned about.
Donald, congratulations. Thank you.
From there, Trump returned to the White House itself with a handshake and a nod to the coming handoff from President Joe Biden.
Looking forward to having, like we said, a smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today.
Meetings between incoming and outgoing presidents are traditional, but in 2020, then President Trump did not extend an invite to then President-elect Biden. In the Oval Office today, they both pledged a smooth transition.
Politics is tough, and it's, in many cases, not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate very much a transition that's so smooth. It'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome.
Notably absent from today's visit, the incoming First Lady, Melania Trump. The White House says Jill Biden wrote her a letter and is prepared to assist her with the transition. Trump announced 4 names today to his new White House, all of them close campaign advisors. Stephen Miller as Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and Homeland Security Advisor, as well as Dan Scavino, James Blair, and Taylor Budowich. They will all serve as Deputy Chiefs of Staff. Trump has tapped former Representative and former Democrat Tulsi Gabbard to serve as Director of National Intelligence, and a bombshell choice for Attorney General, Florida Representative Matt Gaetz, a staunch Trump loyalist who has been an elected politician for most of his adult life. He would step into the role of the nation's top prosecutor. Meantime, on Capitol Hill, after 2 rounds of voting, Senate Republicans emerged with their first new leader in nearly 18 years, choosing John Thune, the senior senator from South Dakota, known outside the Senate as a communicator and inside it for good relationships with all corners of the party.
The American people have loudly rejected the failed policies of the Biden, Harris, Schumer agenda. And this Republican team is united. We are on one team. We are excited to reclaim the majority and to get to work with our colleagues in the House to enact President Trump's agenda.
But to win, 63-year-old Thune had to address his past breaks with Donald Trump. In 2016, after the release of the Access Hollywood tape, in which Trump bragged of assaulting women, Thune called on Trump to leave the presidential race. Then in 2020, Thune decried Trump's efforts to overturn the election results in Congress. Trump fired back that Thune was a rhino, Republican in name only, threatening that his political career was over. Thune worked this year to repair the relationship, meeting with Trump in March, and recently writing that he is open to Trump's demand for potential recess appointments. He spoke to that today.
Well, what we're going to do is make sure that we are processing his nominees in a way that gets them into those positions so they can implement his agenda. I've said this, and I mean it, that we expect a level of cooperation from the Democrats to work with us to get these folks installed. And obviously we're going to look at explore all options to make sure that they get moved and that they get moved quickly.
Leader Thune's relationship with Trump will be a test for both men and for the Senate itself, which has traditionally stood as a check on executive power, whether the president is a member of your party or the opposite party. Jeff?
And Lisa, what does Senator Thune's election, his elevation as Republican leader now, what does that tell us about the GOP-led Senate?
That's right. It tells you that this is a place that still values institutions and traditions, as well as the way the Senate has functioned for most of modern politics. And the reason here is this was a furious push from MAGA, Trump-aligned Republicans to try and get in the person they saw as the most loyal Trump supporter, someone who wanted to change the way the Senate operated. Instead, the senators, in secret ballot measures, voted for John Thune. And part of that, too, is the way senators themselves work. They clearly are saying that they believe John Thune is the one who can help them and help the Senate get things done the best.
The nominations came fast and with some fury from the president-elect. Trump picked Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. Kennedy suspended his own independent run for president this summer and endorsed Trump. As Laura Barón-López told Amna Nawaz, he's also an anti-vaccine activist and has pushed several debunked conspiracies.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has also said has spread a lot of conspiracy theories, things like baseless claims that vaccines cause autism. He has blamed school shootings on antidepressant use, and he's claimed that the FDA is actively suppressing the use of raw milk. Public health experts have warned that drinking raw milk can lead to illnesses.
So you've been talking to public health experts here. What kind of impact are they saying that Kennedy could have on Americans' health and also preparedness for another potential pandemic?
RFK Jr. has spread a lot of conspiracies like the ones I just talked about, Amna, but he's also said that COVID-19 was engineered so that way Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people would be immune to it. And I spoke to Dr. Georges Benjamin, executive director of the American Public Health Association, and he said that RFK Jr.'s anti-vaccine rhetoric and the potential policies he might prioritize could have very dangerous ramifications.
RFK Jr. has been on the record as saying there's no safe and effective vaccine. And because of that, people are not going to take vaccines. Even if he was to change his tune and promote vaccines, no one will know what to believe. So RFK is not the person for this job. He doesn't have the medical trainings, the skill of managing a large organization, and he is not a well-trusted individual. And because of that, we're going to see more people get sick, and I'm really, really concerned that more people will die.
Dr. Benjamin said that a lot of what the federal government does is by influence. It's not necessarily by regulation. So when health guidances are put out or encouragement of an education of the public to receive vaccines. And so doctors like Georges Benjamin, as well as pediatrician Paul Offit, who I spoke to earlier this year, said that there are big, dangerous ramifications when someone like RFK Jr. says that people shouldn't take vaccines. Ramifications where there is a downtick in the number of people and children who get polio and measles vaccines, which can lead to deaths, Amna.
Nick Schifrin looks at 3 of Trump's picks to lead much of America's expansive security, military, and diplomatic efforts.
It is the largest bureaucracy in the country and the most expensive military in the world. And President-elect Trump's nominee for Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, says the department's policies are all wrong.
Well, first of all, you got to fire you got to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and you got to fire this. I mean, obviously, you're going to bring in a new Secretary of Defense, but any general that was involved, general, admiral, whatever, that was involved in any of the DEI woke, it's got to go.
I'm thinking about my mentors and how rarely I had a mentor that looked like me.
In 2020, before he became Joint Chiefs Chairman, General C.Q. Brown acknowledged the racism he suffered. That year, the department redesigned military education to teach implicit bias. And under the Biden administration, diversity programs have expanded.
There's a reason people don't want to serve, because they don't trust that their senior leaders are going to have their best interest in mind in combat. That trust is broken. And you have to reestablish that trust by putting in no-nonsense warfighters in those positions who aren't going to cater to the socially correct garbage.
Hegseth also opposes an Obama-era decision to allow women to serve in combat.
I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. It hasn't made us more effective, hasn't made us more lethal, has made fighting more complicated.
In 2019, Hegseth helped convince then-President Trump to pardon 2 Army soldiers accused of murdering Afghan civilians and reverse the demotion of Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher, convicted of posing for photographs with a deceased Iraqi civilian.
So let's just be honest about it and unleash our warfighters to fight. So
long before Hegseth became a Fox News co-host, he was a major in the Army National Guard who served in Iraq and Afghanistan and won 2 Bronze Stars. As a soldier and veteran, he sent messages to his supporters advocating for the surges in Iraq and Afghanistan. That was then.
I've been a recovering neocon for 6 years now. Like the foolishness with which we ricocheted around the world, intervening, think it was in our best interest, when really we just overturned the table and created something worse in almost every single scenario, has led to the hubris of the Pentagon is that they want to now tell other countries how to do counterinsurgency based on what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan. Are you kidding me?
On the Hill today, Hegseth's nomination produced a bipartisan split. New York Democrat Dan Goldman.
This person is going to be far more loyal to Donald Trump than the Constitution, and that's really dangerous.
Florida Republican and House Armed Services Committee member Carlos Jimenez.
Served in the military and definitely has ideas of how the military or the Defense Department needs to be shaken up. As a member of HASC, I'll tell you, it needs to be shaken up.
There's also expected to be a fight over Tulsi Gabbard to be Director of National Intelligence. Gabbard is a former Hawaii Democratic congresswoman who would oversee 18 intelligence agencies. In 2017, she visited Syria and met President Bashar al-Assad, and for years has trumpeted Syria's and Russia's arguments that all of Assad's opponents are terrorists.
Why is it that the United States, its allies, and other countries are providing support, are providing arms to terrorist groups? Assad is not the enemy of the United States because Syria does not pose a direct threat to the United States.
Russia's RT channel often celebrates her, and she calls Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky an authoritarian.
So the real reason Zelensky has outlawed elections is to stop any who dare to criticize the rampant corruption in Ukraine or the war.
But today, there was bipartisan support for Florida Senator Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. Rubio has long been an advocate for Ukraine, in part because it's a test of U.S. alliances, as he argued last September.
If the United States tomorrow announced we're not doing anything more with Ukraine, we're gone, the impact wouldn't just be felt in Ukraine. Every entire alliance system would be put into doubt.
But recently, Rubio has emphasized Trump's position that the war must end.
For a deeper look at Trump's controversial pick for Secretary of Defense, Nick spoke to James McPherson, who served 25 years in the Navy and was the Army's general counsel during the Trump administration.
What is your reaction to the nomination of Pete Hegseth?
Well, I think Mr. Hegseth has an impressive record. He went to prestigious schools. He's a major in the Minnesota National Guard, multiple deployments, combat deployments that resulted in personal decorations. I think he's well qualified to be a lieutenant colonel in the Minnesota National Guard. Does that qualify him to be Secretary of Defense? That's a question that the Senate is going to have to wrestle with during the confirmation, and that your viewers are going to have to wrestle with when they judge the quality that they're receiving from the Trump administration.
Let me go.
I think there's two things that, yes, sir.
Sorry, you continue.
I would urge the Senate to look at two things with regard to his record. First, his competence. Does he have the record demonstrating competence in what is probably the most important and the most powerful job in the cabinet? The Secretary of Defense has a number of hats he wears, and one of them is he is in the operational chain of command. It's actually the Secretary of Defense that makes the decision to send our sons and daughters overseas in harm's way. In addition to that, he also leads and manages the largest organization in our government, one of the largest organizations in the world. Does he have the character and the competence to do that? And when I say character, I mean, does he have the courage to say to the president, if the president has an idea that perhaps would damage our standing, our national security standing overseas or at home, Does he have the courage to say, Mr. President, that's not a good idea, we really shouldn't do that? Again, that's a decision that the Senate's going to have to make during his confirmation.
Let me ask you about your experience in the Army. As I said, you had a top job in the Army during a moment that I highlighted, when then President Trump pardoned 2 Army soldiers accused of murdering Afghan civilians and reversed the demotion of Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher. What was the impact of then President Trump's moves then?
It sent a terrible message, especially with regard to those 3 individuals were alleged to have committed war crimes. The 2 Army officers were alleged to have ordered their men to kill civilians. And one of the individuals had been convicted of that at a court-martial and sentenced to Leavenworth, and the other was pending a court-martial. The pardon that came down really sent the message to the troops in the field that you don't have to obey the laws of war. You don't have to adhere to the Geneva Conventions. You can kill civilians. That's something that our Army, our nation, simply does not do. Our people wouldn't stand for that. You're supposed to protect civilians on the battlefield, not victimize them.
Mr. Hegseth had a role in convincing then President Trump of making those decisions. Are you concerned by his role in that moving forward?
Well, his role was to advocate for those pardons that the president awarded while he was with Fox News. He repeatedly had members of the family, wives of the 2 Army officers on to tell their side of the story. And really, the Army didn't have an opportunity to tell its side of the story. And it was the Fox News advocacy that prompted then President Trump to grant those pardons. And that is a concern.
As you mentioned at the top, he's a veteran, won 2 Bronze Stars, served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Guantanamo Bay. Does that kind of experience help when it comes to leading the Department of Defense?
Well, it's the experience that he knows what it is like to be a troop in the field. And that's important. We've seen that in previous secretaries, both Secretary Mattis, Secretary Esper, and I think it's important that experience is under his belt, but it certainly was on a lower level. He led troops as a major. He probably had maybe 10, 15, 20 people he was in charge of. That's vastly different than what he's going to be called upon to do as Secretary of Defense.
The top of my story highlighted some of his criticism of what he called the DEI woke stuff. Have diversity efforts had an impact on military readiness, in your opinion?
Not in my opinion. I haven't seen that. I haven't heard that from the people that I stay in contact with. What you're referencing there is very troubling, and that is the creation of this panel that's going to review general and admirals and see if they are woke. That evidence is a misunderstanding of the role of an admiral and a general. Admirals and generals execute lawful policy and lawful orders. It's a policy that an administration sets that guides the Pentagon, and it's expected that those officers will implement that policy. It's not a policy that they may like. They don't have to like it. As long as it's lawful, they have to execute it. And that's exactly what these officers have been doing. When the Trump administration moves into the White House, they can change those policies. They can issue new policies. And they'll find that their admirals and their generals will execute those policies. Decades now we have heard it called, it was Bush's generals, or it was Obama's generals, or it was Trump's generals. That's just a misunderstanding of what the role is and how generals really attain that rank. They're selected by boards that select those that are best and well qualified. And it's a meritocracy. They're not appointed like civilian presidential appointees. And now to say that you're going to judge them upon execution of a lawful policy, it doesn't make sense.
What would be the impact then if the new administration went beyond just simply changing the policy, as Mr. Hegseth has threatened, as former Trump officials tell me is possible, to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, to fire service chiefs, to fire combatant commanders, as you just said, deemed, quote, too woke? What would be the impact?
I think it would send a terrible message. I think it would send a terrible message that the United States military is no longer a meritocracy. You're not selected for promotion because of the tremendous job that you've done in previous assignments. You're selected for promotion as long as you adhere to the policies of the current administration. That's an anathema to the officer corps.
James McPherson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
As we mentioned, Trump has also nominated Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz, one of his most prominent loyalists and a longtime critic of the federal government, to lead the Department of Justice. Gaetz led efforts to oust former Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, was a major supporter of Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election, and at one point faced a Justice Department sex trafficking investigation. Prosecutors declined to charge him. NPR's Carrie Johnson covers the DOJ, and she spoke with Jeffrey Bennett.
So this is another sign that Donald Trump is rewarding loyalty as he builds his cabinet, as is his right. Matt Gaetz, we should say, though, is a polarizing figure with little prosecutorial experience. Help us understand why Donald Trump is choosing him.
Matt Gaetz has minimal legal credentials, Jeff, but he has a shared animus with Donald Trump against the institution of the Justice Department and the FBI. Both of these men, of course, have been subject to federal investigations, FBI investigations looked after by federal prosecutors, and they have come away kind of radicalized in some respects about those institutions and the power they have. Donald Trump today, in his statement announcing he wanted Matt Gaetz to be the Attorney General, called him tenacious and praised his relentless oversight of the Justice Department from Congress. And Trump seems to want to clean house at the Justice Department. Matt Gaetz may be the man to do that if he gets confirmed by the Senate.
And as we said, Gaetz has his own ethical and legal problems. The DOJ investigated him as part of a sex trafficking probe. He was not charged. There is an ongoing House ethics investigation, though. And he was said to be so concerned, Carrie, about his legal exposure after January 6th that he asked Donald Trump for a pardon. That's according to a former Trump White House lawyer. What more should we know? Bring us up to speed.
Yeah, Matt Gaetz did not get that pardon, but one of the things the incoming president, Donald Trump, has promised is pardons for a whole host of January 6 defendants, people who were actually charged with and convicted of crimes. It's not clear where Trump is going to want to draw the line, whether it's going to just involve nonviolent people on January 6th or others. But Matt Gaetz seems to share a view of what happened on January 6th with the incoming president of the United States. Matt Gaetz has actually introduced legislation to support some of those defendants. And so I think he's very like-minded with Trump on that topic in particular.
An AG pick, as you well know, is among the most important selections a president can make. The Attorney General guides what is really the world's largest law firm. Big picture, help us understand, what does an Attorney General do? What does the DOJ do? And what could an AG, Matt Gaetz, what kind of impact could he have if he's confirmed?
It's a huge institution, over 110,000 employees who do everything from investigate crimes against children to cyber attacks to potential terrorist attacks. They go after drug crimes and drug gangs. And also the head of the Justice Department is in charge of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. It's in charge of the FBI in significant respects. An Attorney General has basically the power to set priorities about what gets investigated and what does not. And we already know Donald Trump says he wants to investigate some of his political enemies, including members of Congress and perhaps even the almost former President Joe Biden and his family.
Carrie Johnson, so grateful to be able to draw on your reporting and insights.
Thank you so much.
Hours after that interview, Gaetz resigned his seat in Congress, reportedly just days before a House Ethics Committee was going to release a report about other allegations against him. In contrast to his first administration, many of Trump's cabinet picks this time are also close allies. Among them, John Ratcliffe, nominated to be the director of the CIA. Laura Barone-Lopez has more.
Trump announced his pick for the U.S. ambassador to Israel, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. An evangelical Christian, Huckabee has long been a vocal supporter of Israel. As recently as June, he opposed ceasefire efforts between Israel and Hamas. Trump said in a statement that Huckabee, quote, loves Israel and the people of Israel, and likewise the people of Israel love him. As for Trump's Secretary of Homeland Security, another loyalist.
The only person in the race that I trust to do what needs to be done on these issues is President Trump.
Multiple reports say Trump has picked Kristi Noem, South Dakota's Republican governor, for the job. Like Rubio, Noem stumped for Trump on the campaign trail and was herself an early contender to be his running mate. Noem has echoed Trump's anti-immigration rhetoric, and she, along with Trump's so-called border czar, will be critical to fulfilling a top campaign promise: mass deportations on day one. Tom Homan, the former acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, will step into that role. On Fox News last night, he sent a stark message to all undocumented immigrants.
If you're in the country legally, You shouldn't feel comfortable, absolutely not. When you enter this country illegally, you have committed a crime. You are a criminal, and you're not off the table.
One by one, the positions are filling out. But still, the House of Representatives hangs in the balance with more than a dozen races too close to call.
We have an embarrassment of riches.
Speaker Mike Johnson is confident Republicans will retain their control, even as Trump pulls from their ranks and narrows the margins.
Many of them could serve in really important positions in the new administration. But President Trump fully understands and appreciates the math here, and it's just a numbers game. We believe we're going to have a larger majority than we had last time.
One of those appointees is New York Representative Elise Stefanik, picked to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. She's a staunch defender of Trump, dating back to his first impeachment. Trump today named 3-term Florida Representative Mike Waltz as his national security advisor, leaving another House seat up for grabs. Waltz is a retired Army National Guard officer who served multiple tours in Afghanistan, and like Senator Rubio, another China hawk. And Lee Zeldin, a former representative from New York, was chosen to lead the Environmental Protection Agency. He has little to no experience in environmental issues, but he'll be critical in Trump's pledge to dismantle the EPA's climate rules.
So day one and the first 100 days, we have the opportunity to roll back regulations that are forcing businesses to be able to struggle. Advancing America First policies is one of the reasons why President Trump got elected.
For the PBS News Hour, I'm Laura Barone-Lopez.
That's it for this episode of PBS News Weekly. For all of us, thank you so much for watching.